Before we move on, I would like to acknowledge two other provincial Greens who I just noticed were in the audience. Of course, the leader of the provincial Green Party, Jane Stirk, is here in the front row, and beside her is Susan Lowe, the candidate for his finance. And clearly over here on stage right, we have Susan Lowe Fan Club as well. The next person who will speak as we lead up to David Suzuki is someone who really needs no introduction, but someone that I'm going to drag you through a long-winded introduction because I think many may not know the background of this person. Elizabeth May is an environmentalist, a writer, an activist, and a lawyer who's been active in the environmental movement since 1970. She's a graduate of the Dalhousie Law School and was admitted to the bar in both Nova Scotia and Ontario. She's held the position of Associate General Counsel for the Public Interest Advocacy Centre, representing consumer, poverty, and environmental groups from 1985 to 1986. She's worked extensively with Indigenous peoples internationally, particularly in the Amazon, as well as with the Canadian First Nations, and was the first volunteer executive director of Cultural Survivor Canada from 1989 to 1992. From 1991 to 1992, she worked for the Algonquin of Barrier Lake. In 1986, Elizabeth May became Senior Policy Advisor to the then Federal Environment Minister, Tom McMillan. She was instrumental in the creation of several national parks, including South Moresby, which I remember hearing about much when I was in my university days. And this is, of course, in Haida Gwaii. Many may not realize that Elizabeth was also instrumental in the negotiation of the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer, a key example of international legislation that led to success and dealing with the global environmental issue through the coming together of the world's nations. She's taught courses at Queen's University School of Policy Studies, as well as teaching for a year at Dalhousie University to develop a program for a year, and that led to the development of a program established in her name in women's health and environment. She holds 3 honorary doctorates. We've got to work on that and get her a 4th one for in the next coming year. And she's the author of 7 books. She served on numerous boards of environmental groups, advisory bodies, universities, governments in Canada, including the Earth Charter Commission, co-chaired by Maurice Strong and Mikhail Gorbachev. And she's a recipient of so many awards, I don't know where to begin, but some of the key ones, of course, are the Outstanding Achievement Award from the Sierra Club, the International Conservation Award from Friends of Nature, the UN Global 500 Award in 1990, and was named one of the world's leading women environmentalists by the UN in 2006. Her environmental work has been profiled in numerous documentaries, including the final episode of the acclaimed CBC series, Canada, People's History. In June 2006, she stepped down as Executive Director of Sierra Club of Canada, which she held since 1989 to run for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, which clearly she was successful on, and she became Green Party's 9th leader at their August 2006 convention. She's an officer of the Order of Canada, and in 2010 was Newsweek named her one of the world's most influential women. In 2011, much to the sheer joy of many of you in the audience, including me, who happens to live in her riding, she made history as being the first elected Green Party candidate in North America to the House of Commons. She now represents us in the riding of Sandwich Gulf Islands. And finally, she is without any doubt the single most effective politician from any party in Ottawa today.
Which is unfortunate for those of you in the audience who know what happens when I remember funny stories that I have to tell you about. But I remember that last episode of Canada, A People's History. It was very cool. I mean, that I was in, it's a documentary thing. And my daughter was in grade 3, and they showed it to her in school. She'd been watching all the episodes. We sat down in front of the TV one night for the last episode of Canada, A People's History, and it featured me. And when it was over, my daughter, Victoria Cade, was named after my friend Vicky's husband. My daughter turned to me and said, Congratulations, Mummy, you're the first. And I said, well, I'm the first what? She said, well, you're the first person who could ever see himself on Canada People's History because everybody else is dead. Literally, that's what she said. Such a smart kid. But, you know, it's true. Our slogan in Savage Called Violence was make history. We knew we could do it. We knew it was within reach. And what I want to share with you for a few minutes tonight is what a difference I think it's made and what it's like to be a member of Parliament. No matter what Adam said, and it was so cool to have all you wonderful people here, and Chief Charlene Wildman and Caleb, I'm so honored to have, and Dan Mangan to do an uncharacteristic political gig. But actually my life isn't lonely. I set out as I meant to go, and on my, I was elected, as you'll probably remember, May 2nd, 2011, and by June 2nd, I was in Ottawa, the House was starting, and I decided, okay, there were an uncharacteristically large number of new MPs entering the House. 110 out of 308 were newly elected. And I thought, okay, I want to make sure that I can work across party lines. I want to make sure we break down the really pernicious and divisive and perverse, really sort of, I do describe it as a cancerous growth on the body politic of intense partisanship that could never imagine that you'd actually want to work with someone in another party. So to start out, what I did was I sent invitations, well, the invitations is another funny story, but I'll try to make it short. I got invitations, which wasn't easy, to the 110 newly elected MPs. And the invitation just said, come to a non-party party, come and break the ice. And we gave people name tags that just had first names. So we wouldn't necessarily know when we were meeting people, oh, you're a newly elected Conservative, you're a newly elected Democrat, you're a newly elected Liberal. We actually could start getting, like, how's it going for you? What's your office like? Have you found a place to live? Just normal stuff. And that has stood me in good stead. So I'm not lonely in terms of my social connections, my ability to make friends, to worry about, believe it or not, I really was worried about Bev Oda's dog when she started having seizures. Anyone would be worried about her dog. I mean, these are people you can make friends with, believe it or not. But what I do have is a distinct lack of resources. I'm one member of Parliament, and what I have found over and over again, what that means is not just one in terms of the capacity to sit in the House and make sure nothing happens when I leave the room for a moment. There's always the risk of unanimous consent on something flying through. Literally, there's no warning for unanimous consent. One day in early June of last year, I discovered that the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives had all decided, and the Bloc, that it would be fine to pass a bill on something called mega trials without a single day of hearings before the Justice Committee. And I said, well, that's not right. That's not happening. I'm not giving my consent, so there's no unanimous consent, so we're going to have hearings. That's a very powerful thing for one MP to be able to do. But guess what? That's parliamentary democracy. That's how it's supposed to work. So my great discovery, which is not really much of a discovery because I was pretty sure it was true, is that in Westminster parliamentary democracy, there is such a thing as a member of Parliament having the ability to make change. There is fundamentally the right of every member of Parliament to point out when rules are being broken. Guess what? It's against the rules to yell at people while they're talking. Rule. It's against the rules of the House of Commons to speak derogatorily about others. The rule. It's against the rules of the House of Commons to mislead people, especially if you're the government members. So there are a lot of rules that are routinely broken. And I stand up on points of order, and I can stand up on points of order, and I can participate in every debate. And so some of you will already know this. At the end of my first 12-month period as a member of Parliament, the Times columnist called my office and said, can you check, because, the common wisdom when I got elected. Well, backing up. The common wisdom was I couldn't get elected, right? That was the first common piece of punditry across the country. Everybody knew it couldn't possibly beat Gary Lent. That was clear, so they knew. Without skipping a beat, the common wisdom among the punditry and the political panels and everyone became, well, the Greens are happy they got one person elected, but of course we'll never hear from her again. Because everybody knows one MP can't do anything, right? So at the end of the first year, with the question from the Times columnist, did Elizabeth get to talk much in the House? How much compared to the average MP? And we went back and checked the record of Hansard, and we discovered that yes, actually, I spoke in the House of Commons. In fact, when we checked, I'd spoken more in the House of Commons than any MP by a good margin, including Stephen Harper, Bob Ray, or Tom. Than speaking, I found even with my tiny little office with a really dedicated staff, and they're all watching, it's being live streamed now, so thank you, Craig Canton, thank you, Paul Noble, thank you, Deborah Endiger, thank you, Kathleen O'Hara and Jesse Cody, and all of the interns like Zoe in the front, Jamie. We have an amazing team with one MP's budget. We prepared, well, first of all, read and analyzed the omnibus budget bill before any of the other parties had looked at it, Bill C-38 last spring. We put forward 330 amendments to try to block that bill, to force changes. It's such a contempt for democracy that a bill of 425 pages changing 70 laws would ever have been tabled at all. But it's really an affront to democracy when that bill goes to first reading on April 26 and emerges in June with royal assent without a single amendment being accepted, without a single change to the destruction of the Environmental Assessment Act, the destruction of the Fisheries Act habitat provisions, the destruction of changing the National Energy Board so it's merely advisory to Cabinet so Cabinet can overturn it. 70 differently, eliminating the National Roundtable, 70 different laws amended, gutted, and repealed, and not a single change. And then, again, with my small resources, we were the only ones who initially noticed that the Canada-China Investment Treaty had been tabled, because it was tabled twice. So I'm giving the message here that I want to share is, yes, being one Green MP has allowed me to do so much more than any other individual MP is capable of doing. But you know, it's not because I'm special or any, there are a lot of very bright, wonderful people in all the other parties. Really, there are. Their problem is that they have to work within the constraints of this partisanship, this hyper-partisanship that says that we're not electing MPs to make wise decisions or seek out good public policy based on sound evidence. We're electing a bunch of people who really care about their communities, who think they're public-spirited, who want to become members of Parliament to do good work in public policy, and find themselves, once elected, to be meaningless cogs in a political machine that's run by a bunch of backroom boys who are only thinking about the next election and care nothing about public policy in the moment. That I approach my colleagues in Parliament. I approach them all with compassion and love because more than anything else, I want to liberate them from the structures and chains which bind them to reading out idiotic statements on cards that have been prepared for them. They must be liberated. Because every time I say in Parliament, well, it's quite fun, but the joke is getting old, on behalf of myself and my entire caucus. I'm the only caucus in Parliament that's 100% female. I yearn for gender parity. I yearn for a large, undisciplined, unruly caucus. Because when I say to the media, we will never have a party whip in the Green Party. I read the bills. I decide what's in the interest of the voters of Saanich Gulf Islands. I work for them. They are the people who put their trust in me, and I will not miss a vote. I will not miss a day in Parliament except to go to the horrible climate negotiations next week in Doha. I work for the people of Saanich Gulf Islands, and I will fight pipelines, and I will stop supertankers on our coastlines, and end fracking, and protect First Nations rights. And by God, if there's any way in this world to make Stephen Harper resign, leave, or get fired before 2015, I'm going to find it. week from today, between 7:30 in the morning and 7:30 at night, we've got a chance to give the body politic, the pundits, and the assumed wisdom. Everybody knows the Greens can't win. It was a fluke Elizabeth May won. It's a fluke. I guess she talks a lot, and I guess she did put up the biggest fight on C-38, but it's just all down to the category of me as some kind of anomaly in the political system. It's not. It's about me understanding the way democracy works, respecting Westminster parliamentary democracy, and knowing that if a super bright, dedicated, genius guy like Don Galloway gets to be in Parliament and do what I'm doing on his own, not taking my orders, but reading the bills and doing the work and preparing the amendments and speaking out on every single bill, then I know the only MP in the House of Commons who's got a chance to speak in the House of Commons more than I do will be Donald. Period before David Suzuki speaks. And in that brief stretch period, what we're going to do is ask for your help. There are volunteers all around the edges here. You know you got in here for free, but you know you're not getting out for free. So we're going to pass buckets along the aisles. You can throw in cash. We're splitting it between Donald Galloway's campaign and the Provincial Greens campaign for Andrew Weaver. If you have a credit card instead of cash or a check instead of, and you want to designate, okay, Donald Galloway's campaign, okay, BC Greens, just put a hand up to make sure someone comes to you who has the information for credit cards. Otherwise, just of those of you who go to church know what it's like. Those of you who've never gone can imagine. They actually pass the baskets along and you put the money in. That's the way it works. And then you go to heaven, see? So, it's all going to work out fine. The other thing I need is that there are little handouts here about these. These are genius. We have 37,000 of these to hang on doors. We have them ready to go for student residences at UVic too, that tell people who hadn't thought of it, this is how you vote, this is where you go, this is what you do. It's public service information. Each door hanger has a sticker on it that tells people at their very door, this is where your polling station is. So volunteers have already been knocking themselves out to get all these ready, but we need approximately 300 volunteers to deliver them. Starting from Wednesday night, November 21st at 6 o'clock onward, we're going to be hanging these door knockers throughout the riding. So if you don't have money and you have time, sign up to volunteer. If you have money and no time, make up for your lack of time by giving generously. If you have both time and money, call me later. I'd love to meet you for a drink. I don't get out much. I work all the time. I'm a workaholic. No, if you have money and time, let's both, okay? So, this is your 10-minute stretch break. When you come back in 10 minutes exactly, you'll get to hear from the quite extraordinarily wonderful Dr. David Suzuki.